Okay, so on this one looks a little tricky, and so you do have to be kind of careful on problems like this. One of the best approaches to problems like this is just change everything to sine and cosines and just kind of see what happens, if anything kind of will help you out here. And so that's the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'll go ahead and I'm going to change this right here into basically it's going to become 2 times 1 over cosine of theta times sine of theta over cosine of theta, and then plus 1 over cosine of theta squared equals 0. And so what I'll notice is that I'm going to go ahead and multiply this all together, kind of clean it up. I'm going to have a common denominator. So I'm going to end up having 2 sine of theta over cosine of theta squared plus 1 over cosine of theta squared equals 0. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add those together. And so I'm going to end up with, oops, I'm going to end up with 2 sine of theta plus 1 all over cosine of theta squared equals 0. And so, this is what they want us to figure out. And here is our domain, or basically our parameters of what we need to be looking, that we can look for to find this. And so what I would kind of think about is that I know that if I take 0 and divide it by something other than 0, that will equal 0, right? So as long as my denominator is not 0, so just to make a point, my denominator cannot be, you can't have 0 over 0. But if my numerator is 0, then the whole thing will collapse and turn into 0. Okay, so with that in mind, you do want to be careful to make sure you don't accidentally come up with a solution that would cause both to equal 0. So I'm going to make a little note here. So basically, the values of theta that will be off limits would be pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And so those values are off limits because that would cause my denominator to equal 0. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to focus on the numerator because, like what I was showing up here, if I can figure out what values of theta make the numerator equal 0, um, that should work. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take 2 sine of theta plus 1 and set that equal to 0 and solve that. So let's see, subtract by 1 on both sides. So 2 sine of theta equals -1. Then we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. And let's see what we get here. We're going to have sine of theta equals -1/2. So I got to figure out where does sine of theta equal -1/2. And you might just know it offhand, but I always like to kind of draw a picture. And so let's see, sine is synonymous with my y value. So it's going to be down in these parts right here. And so I believe this would be what, 7 pi over 6, and this would be 11 um, pi. Oops, not pi. 11 pi over 6. So that's a 7, and this would be 11 pi over 6. And so, yeah, that would make my numerator equal 0. My denominator would be something. It doesn't really matter. I guess it would be uh, square root of 3 over 2 and negative square root of 3 over 2. But it doesn't matter because if the top goes to 0, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So those are my two solutions right there. 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. So I hope that helps. If you got any more, feel free to send them.